Welcome to the course Business Analytics and Text Mining Modeling using Python. So, in previous few lectures we have been focusing on the Python language. So, in previous lecture specifically we were discussing list and various methods and various scenarios and how we can work with list. So, let us pick up from the point where we stopped in the previous lecture. So, we started our discussion on slicing and how we can perform the same using list data structures in Python. So, let us start from there. Sometimes there might be certain scenarios where we would like to subset a list and use that for further coding, further processing depending on the scenario. So, how that can be performed? Slicing briefly we have used in previous lectures also. So, now let us discuss this in more detail. So, in slicing we use the bracket operator again. So, let us say we have this list V3 that we were using in the previous lecture, and now within the bracket operator if let us say so in the output number 50 you can see the values of this V3 list 7, 11, 17, 19, 23, 53 and 75. So, we have total 7 elements as part of this list. Now, if you want to subset this list starting from index 1 to index 5. When we say index 1 it actually means the second element in the list, and when we say index 5 it actually means the sixth element in the list. So, in the V3 it will actually mean that we will start the slicing and we will include 11 and then 17 and then 19 and 23. So, if we perform this, if we execute this line of code V3 brackets 1 to 5, so you can see the output. So, these 4 elements have been sliced out of the existing list V3. So, in a sense we have produced a subsetted list. Now, this particular slicing mechanism can also be used to perform partial modification of a list. So, in a sense if you look at the code that code example that we are using here V3, and we are picking these 3 element here. In indices we are mentioning 0 to 2, right. So, on the right hand side you can see we are assigning these values 1, 2, 3, and let us run this. So, as you can see in the output we have just executed this assignment. So, you can see the first 3 elements they have been added here 1, 2, 3, and if you compare this with the V3 output, that is output 50 here. So, compare what we have in the output 50 with what we have in the output 52. So, you can see earlier we had 7, 11 and then 17. Now, what we have 1, 2, 3 and then 17. So, you can see 1, 2, 3 have been added there and we have lost 7 and 11. So, this is happening because the end point when we did this subsetting in this the code of line number 52 0 to 2. So, only 0 and 1 the end point, the start point and the up to the end point are selected. So, indices 0 and 1 were selected. So, those were meant for these first 2 values of the elements in V3 7 and 11. So, 7 and 11 were replaced by a new list 1, 2, 3, and that is why we are seeing the list V3 has been modified in that sense. So, the same thing same thing we will learn again using few more examples. So, let us move on. That this particular syntax that we talked about, where if we are doing this slicing. So, we mention starting index and the ending index. Sometimes we can omit the start index. In the top index we will have to mention all the time. So, next example what we are doing is V3 and then the brackets no start index and then we have colon and then 5, which is the stop index. So, if I run this, execute this, you can see 1, 2, 3, 17, 19. So, you can see the index, the stop index was 5, that means 6th element, but we in the output we have just got the 5 element. So, you can see the end point is not included, and two things we are trying to demonstrate here. One is the syntax, where we can afford to drop the start index in the code, and the second thing is in the output you can clearly see that the stop index, the element associated with the stop index is not part of the final output. So, the subsetted list that we that we generate does not have the element associated with the stop index. Now, similarly, it might also happen that sometimes we would like to drop the stop index. So, one of these two indices are required. So, in the next code example, what we have V3 and then we have the start index 6, then colon and then no stop index. So, what will happen is that would be by default will be taken at till the end of the list. Similarly, in the previous case when we had when we did not mention the start index, it was by default was taken from the start of the list. So, in this case end of the list. So, starting from the index number 6 to the end of the list. If I run this, so you can see V3 6 and we got these just these two elements 53 and 75, right. So, you can see in the output number 50 and compare it with here. So, you can see that this is what we have got. So, start index is included. So, that is why we have got 53 and then till the end of the list, that is 75. It is also possible that in certain scenarios we would like to use the negative index negative index for certain situation. So, that kind of slicing can also be performed. So, in the next code example you can see that we are using V3 and in the start index we have used the negative value, that is -3 and then colon. So, what happens when we do this? Let us execute this code example first. So, you can see in the output, now compare the output 55 and output 52. So, output 52 is the original list V3 and you can see that in the line of code number 53 we have mentioned for -3. So, it is it is being counted from the end of the list. So, from the end of the list 3 elements are being sliced from the original list. So, that is why we are getting 23, 53 and 75. So, in this fashion we can use negative indexing also, and from the end of the list those that particular operation is going to be performed. Let us understand this thing again with one more example. So, in this new example in this code example 59 we have V3 and the start index is -5, then colon and the stop index is -2. So, again the numbering is, in a sense you can consider like numbering is starting from the end of the list, and from the end of the list we go back to the we count up to 5 and then. So, in this fashion if we look at the original list that is there in the output 52. So, you can see 17, 19 and 23, then we will have to stop because the stop index is -2. So, let us run this and you can see we have got these 3 elements 17, 19 and 23. So, in this fashion the slicing in a particular list can be performed, and it is a quite useful while we are processing data which we typically require for most of the analytics problem. Now, there might be certain situation where we would like to follow a pattern to perform our slicing. Something like that can also be performed. Let us understand this aspect through an example. So, let us look at this V3 variable once again. So, let us execute this. So, this is our V3 list. We have these elements 8 elements 1, 2, 3, 17, 19, 23, 53 and 75. And now, if we want every second element after start. So, how we can achieve that? So, the syntax is going to be like this V3 and in the brackets operator within the brackets operator we can type double colon and 2. So, what it will say that we can pick after the start we can pick every second element. So, you can see if I run this, If I execute this line of code, you can see the starting element of the list V3 has been is the first element in this output 1, and then every second element after start. So, we got 3 and then 19 and then 53. So, following this pattern, alternate index alternate element is being produced in the output. Similarly, we can take another code example where we would like to pick up the every third element after start. So, the code can be appropriately changed. So, in the V3 and within the brackets we can type double colon 3. So, every third element after the start element is going to be part of this slicing sliced subset list. So, you can see 1 is there, then third element 2 3 17 is there, then 19 23 and 53 is here. So, if I run this, you can see this output is there. Now, slicing can also be used to achieve certain other operations, for example reversing a list. So, that is also possible. So, let us again have a look at the values of this list V3. You can see the same elements. Now, if you want to achieve the reversing of this list, we can use this particular syntax in the code line number 66 V3, and within double brackets we can mention double colon and then -1. So, this -1 is indicating that the list is to be reversed. So, if I execute this line of code, you can see in the output the whole list has been reversed and we have got 75 53 23 in that reverse order of the original list V3. Because we have talked about that list and tuples, they are semantically they are very similar. So, this reversing is something that we can also perform in the tuple also, because tuple are immutable objects. So, but the reversing thing can be performed because it does not modify, we get a new tuple actually. So, let us take this tuple 6. So, let us see. So, these are the elements in this tuple 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and if I use the same kind of syntax here for reversing the tuple top 6 and within the brackets I have double colon -1, and if I run this, you can see the tuple has been reversed. So, now let us move to the some of the important, some of the useful sequence function that in certain scenarios they are very useful. So, let us start with this function called enumerate. So, this function this particular function enumerate is actually a generator. So, it will actually materialize whenever we are using it with the list or for loop. We will understand that with an examples. We will also talk about few other functions which also materialize whenever they are used with list or for loop. So, some of these functions are quite useful in certain scenarios. So, we will learn them through some of the code examples. So, when this can be useful? So, can be used to track the current iteration number. So, many times there are situations where we would like to track which particular iteration is running. So, first let us go through the typical approach that we adopt. So, let us take this example of sequence. So, in this we have these values 7 2 6 4 9, and then we have a variable I 0 initialized as 0, and this is actually we are going to use to keep track of the iteration number in the for loop. So, we have very simple for loop here just to demonstrate this this scenario. So, for x in sequence and x simple computation, x is being assigned x plus I, and then I is being incremented by 1. So, if I run this, you can see the final value of I is 5, because 5 number of iterations have been performed. At any particular point of time we can print this within the loop also, and we can find out which iteration is running. So, in a sense I can be used to track the iteration number. If you look at the value of x, so this is 13. Now, the same thing can be achieved much easily using enumerate function. So, we will have to just to type fewer lines of code here in more structured manner. So, here you can see the loop goes like this. So, enumerate function. So, when we pass on this list sequence to enumerate function, in the for loop, because this is being used in the for loop, it will return a sequence of tuples. In the sense I am running this loop like for I x in enumerate. So it will the tuple will have the index and then same order the value in the this particular list sequence. So if I run this particular for loop, you can see, and I, the value of I is now 4, because the again indexing is 0 indexing is used. So it will start from 0 1 2 3 4. So after 5 iteration the value of I is going to be 4. So the tuples would be 0 and the value of x in the sequence list is going to be 7 0 7, then 1 2, then 2 6, then 3 4, and then 4 9. So these are the tuples that are going to be returned by enumerate function, and accordingly the loop will run. And if you look at the value of x, there is no change, the value comes out to be 13. Now if we just execute enumerate sequence to find out the output what is happening, so we do not get any output here, but if we use it with list we will get what I was talking about, that the enumerate is returning tuples. So you can see in the output now number 70 0 7 1 2 2 6 3 4 and 4 9. So enumerate function is returning these tuples, and then this in the for loop I comma x, that is also in a sense forming a tuple. So the iteration just like we talked before, that easily this iteration can be performed using this function. Now this particular enumerate function can also be useful in certain other scenarios. For example, when we want to map the indices with the values. So the same thing in the previous output number 70 you can see, in a sense a mapping has been done between indices and the element values. So the same thing can be done in a more structured manner. So let us take this example, this list V4. So if I run this, you can see this V4 is a list of these string elements, string values, Om Namah Shiva chanting. So these are the 4 elements, and now I am introducing another data structure in the Python, very important data structure, that is Dict, DICT, and this Dict variable that I have mapping, and with the we are defining or initializing an empty Dict here, and with the curly braces. So more detail on Dict we will discuss in the coming lectures. So once we initialize this, so the Dict is in a sense a collection, and this can really be used to perform this kind of mapping. So let us go through this example just to demonstrate how enumerate can be really useful in this mapping situation. So for I comma x in enumerate V4, so when we say enumerate V4, it will again return us the sequence of tuples, and then easily the for loop is going to be iterated, and you can see we are just creating this mapping. So within the for loop the only line of code that we have is mapping x with I. So indices are being mapped with this these values. So if I run this, you can see in the output, this is the output that you are getting is actually this data structure type Dict, DICT, and you can see a colon separator is there in the first element that is there in Dict, and first we have Om and then colon and the 0. So in a sense this is a key value kind of pair on combination. We will discuss Dict in more detail later. So you can see the next mapping is Namah 1, then Shiva 2, and chanting 3. So you can see enumerate can be really useful to perform this kind of mapping. So let us move on. So next useful function is sorted. This can be used to produce a a new sorted list. So let us say we have this list 19, 75, 53, 23, 7 and 11, and we can use this sorted function, and the output would be a sorted list. So sometimes this function can also be useful, you can see in the output. Similarly, if we take another code example, here we are passing a list of string elements, and you can see Shiva, Om, Namah and chanting, and if we use the sorted function you will see the output would be based on the first letter, the alphabetical sorting has been performed here. So, you can see chanting come first, then Nama, then Om and Shiva. So, first letter of these string values. So, the list has been sorted in that particular fashion. So, sometimes this sorted function can be really useful. Now, let us talk about another useful function, that is zip. So, we talked about concatenating tuples and list in this lecture and previous lecture as well. Now, let us take one list and one tuple, and we will see how zip can be used to combine elements. So, concatenation was one thing. Now, what here we are doing, we are combining elements. In a sense, we are creating element pairs. So, in the sequence 1 we have 2 elements Om Nama, and in the sequence 1 we have 2 elements Om Nama, and sequence 2 we have again just 2 elements Shivaya and chanting. Now, when we use the zip function, main idea is to combine first element of sequence 1 with the first elements of element of sequence 2. Similarly, second element of sequence 1 with the second element of sequence 2, so on and so forth. So, this kind of situation is required many times. So, we can use zip function in this. So, again let us run this block of code, and you can see from sequence 1 and sequence 2 using zip function, where we are passing these two sequences as arguments, and the return value of this zip function, from that we are creating a list. So, you can see this list is made up of 2 tuples. So, first tuple is has combined first element from sequence 1 and first element from sequence 2 Om Shivaya in one tuple, and the second element we have combined second element of sequence 1 and second element of sequence 2. So, you can see Nama chanting. So, in this fashion zip can be used to combine elements sequentially. Now, it might so happen that these sequences might have different number of elements within them. So, in that case the sorted sequence having the least number of elements, that will determine the final number of elements, combined elements to be produced. So, let us take another example. So, here we are creating another sequence 3, which is having just one element, that is a bool element, bool value true. And again if we combine these 3 sequences, sequence 1, sequence 2, sequence 3, let us run this. You can see in the output we have got just one tuple, just one element, which has combined the first element of each of these 3 sequences. So, we have got Om, Shivaya and true, and that is the first element with just one tuple element in the list. Now, let us move on. Now, we can use zip function along with enumerate function to simultaneously iterate over multiple sequences. So, zip function in a sense will give us this combined elements, and enumerate is anyway, as we have learned, it can help us to iterate over multiple values. So, let us take this example here. We are running a for loop here in this code example, and we want to simultaneously iterate over multiple sequences. So, you can see first we have I, that is for the index, and then we have a tuple a comma b, and then we have the iterator here, we have enumerate, and we are zipping these 2 sequences, sequence 1 and sequence 2. So, what will happen, we will have this these the output as zipped sequence. In this we will get tuple in a sense list of tuple, and we will be iterating over this. So, in the only line of code that we have within for loop, we have the print statement, and you can see it has been formatted in a sense that we would like to print these values of I, A and B in all the iterations. So, let us run this. So, you can see first iteration we have 0, then Om, and A value will be Om, and then Shivaya. So, please refer to the output that we have in the 75. So, here you can see we have 2 tuples. So, A and B has been assigned the first tuple, then in the next iteration A and B would be assigned the next tuple, that is Nama chanting. So, that is why in the first output you get 0 colon and then Om Shivaya, and then next output 1 and then Nama chanting. So, in this fashion in a sense we have been able to simultaneously iterate over multiple sequences. Now, it is also possible to unzip the sequence. So, we might have a list of tuples where the tuple might have been achieved by combining sequences. So, let us take this example where we have Z sequence where this is a list and list of tuples. So, in the first tuple we have 2 elements and in the second tuple also we have 2 elements. Now, we can use this GIF function again. The syntax is slightly different. Now, in the GIF function as an argument we are passing we are using asterisk operator asterisk Z seq. So, this is the the combined zipped sequence that we have, and using this asterisk operator we can indicate that we would like to unzip. So, because each tuple is having 2 elements, so we can again in the unzipped sequence we can assign like this. In the left hand side you can see U seq1 and U seq2 to indicate the unzipped sequence. If I run this and let us check the values of first unzipped sequence U seq1 Om Namah, and then you can see the second unzipped sequence that first element Om and Namah they had been clubbed, and the original sequence has been restored, and in this second sequence also the same thing, Seva and chanting have been clubbed and the original sequence 2 has been restored. So, in this fashion we can unzip a particular given sequence as well. Now, let us move to the next useful function that is reversed. So, this is also in a way generator. So, typically useful when we are using it with the list or for loop. So, again this can also be used to iterate over elements of a sequence in reversed order. So, as the name is suggesting, so whatever sequence that we might have we can iterate in a reverse order. So, let us run this reverse range 10. If we want to produce this, as you can see we do not get any meaningful output here, but if I use it with the list you will see that typically if you apply range 10 you will get the output from 0 to 9, but here because we are using the reverse function you will see that the reversed output from 9876 this reversed sequence has been generated. So, the next with this we conclude our discussion on the list and tuple and list. Now, we come to the next important data structure that is used in Python, that is Dict. So, we have used this before also in this lecture, and this is considered to be the most important one, and this is also called hash map or associative array, and we can define this as a flexible size mutable collection. If you remember that previously when we talked about the mutable and immutable objects, we mentioned Dicts as the mutable objects. So, this is a flexible sized mutable collection of key value pairs. So, as you have seen in this lecture itself, we with the colon we combine key value. So, we get key value pairs where keys and values are Python objects. So, at this point we would like to stop here and we will continue our discussion on Dict in the next lecture. Thank you.